Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had acid quirk but better than Mina Ashido. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not built equally. Some men are born to stand in the light, casting long, heroic shadows. Others are born to ignite that light, and then, there are those born to rot the foundations upon which the world stands. Izuku Midoriya learned this lesson not at the age of 4, as most children do, but at the precise moment his favorite All Might action figure dissolved into a puddle of bubbling, toxic sludge in the palm of his hand. It was a Tuesday afternoon in the Midoriya household. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a serene domestic scene that was about to be irrevocably scarred. Izuku was watching that video. The one where All Might saves 100 people in less than 10 minutes. The laughter, the booming voice, the sheer presence of the symbol of peace. Izuku, small and freckled, vibrated with excitement. He stomped his feet on the carpet, mimicking the hero's stance. "I'm here!" he squeaked, thrusting the limited edition Silver Age All Might figure into the air. "I'm here to save," he sneezed. It wasn't a normal sneeze. It felt like a hot coal had been lodged in his sinuses, a burning itch that demanded release. When the sneeze erupted, it didn't expel mucus or saliva. Instead, a fine, violent mist of neon green vapor shot from his nose and mouth. The mist hung in the air for a second, heavy and shimmering, smelling of sulfur and burnt sugar. Then, the screaming started. Not from Izuku, but from the plastic in his hand. The All Might figure hissed. It was a vicious sound, like water hitting a hot skillet. Izuku froze, his wide green eyes staring in horror as the hero's face began to liquefy. The vibrant red, white, and blue paint ran together in a gray slurry. The hard plastic softened, drooping over Izuku's fingers like hot wax. "Mom?" Izuku whispered, his voice trembling. He tried to drop the toy, but the substance had become sticky, a viscous gel that clung to his skin. It didn't burn him. His skin felt pleasantly warm, tingling with energy. But where the sludge dripped onto the carpet, the fibers turned black and vanished, leaving behind smoking holes in the floorboards. "Mom!" he screamed this time, panic seizing his chest. Inko Midoriya rushed in from the kitchen, a dish towel in her hand. "Izuku? What's wrong?" She stopped dead. The smell hit her first, acrid, chemical, dangerous. Then she saw her son. He was crying, and his tears weren't clear. They were tinged with a faint, phosphorescent green. Where they rolled down his cheeks and dripped onto his shirt, the fabric disintegrated instantly, leaving holes that exposed his skin. "It won't stop," Izuku wailed, waving his hands. A droplet of the melting toy flew off his finger and landed on the coffee table. The wood hissed, a crater forming instantly, smoke curling up toward the ceiling. "Izuku, don't move!" Inko's motherly instincts battled with primal fear. She recognized the scent. It smelled like the industrial cleaners she kept locked under the sink, but amplified 1,000 times. She grabbed a thick woolen blanket from the sofa, hoping to wrap him in it, to contain whatever was happening. But as she approached, Izuku hiccuped, sobbing. Another cloud of green gas expelled from his mouth. The gas drifted over the family television. The screen instantly frosted over, then shattered as the plastic casing around it melted into slag. "I'm breaking everything!" Izuku cried, curling into a ball. He clutched his knees. His pajama pants dissolved at the touch of his hands. Inko realized with a jolt of terror that she couldn't touch him. If she grabbed him now, her hands might suffer the same fate as the coffee table. "It's okay, baby, it's okay." She backed away, grabbing the phone with trembling fingers. "Mommy is calling for help. Just try to hold your breath. Don't cry." But telling a terrified 4-year-old not to cry is like asking the tide not to come in. Izuku sobbed harder, and with every sob, the air in the living room became more toxic, the floor around him turning into a pit of smoking, charred ruin. Dr. Garaki, or Dr. Tsubasa, as he was known in this clinic, adjusted his thick, tinted goggles. He looked like a man inspecting a nuclear reactor core rather than a pediatrician examining a preschooler. Izuku sat on the examination table. He was naked, save for a specialized, chemically resistant paper gown the clinic had scrambled to find. His hands were encased in thick rubber gloves that were already showing signs of yellowing at the fingertips. Fascinating, the doctor muttered, poking Izuku's arm with a glass rod. Truly fascinating. Inko sat in the corner, clutching her purse. She looked exhausted. The fire department had to hazmat clean her living room. Doctor, what is it? Is it like his father's fire breath? Fire breath? The doctor scoffed, turning to his computer screen which displayed a complex breakdown of Izuku's blood work. No, Mrs. Midoriya. Fire is energy. It burns, it consumes oxygen, and then it vanishes. This is matter creation. Highly volatile matter creation. He spun his chair around. Your son is a walking chemical plant. His sweat glands, his tear ducts, his salivary glands, they've all mutated. He doesn't produce water anymore. He produces a highly corrosive acid. Izuku looked at his gloved hands. Acid? Biohazard, the doctor corrected, tapping his temple. That's what I'm putting on the registry. It's a catastrophic emitter class. Most acid quirks, like the Ashido girl I saw last week, are limited. They produce a specific type of acid with a pH level around 1 or 2. Strong, yes. But your son? The doctor leaned in, his grin hidden behind a surgical mask, though the crinkle of his eyes suggested a morbid delight. We tested a sample of his saliva. It ate through the glass slide. We tried steel. Melted it. We tried ceramic. Eroded it. Izuku has the ability to unconsciously manipulate the molarity and chemical composition of the fluid he excretes. At his peak emotional distress earlier today, he was producing something akin to fluoroantimonic acid, a superacid that is billions of times stronger than pure sulfuric acid. Inko covered her mouth. Billions? He can melt stone, Mrs. Midoriya. He can dissolve organic matter in seconds. He can turn the acid into a liquid, a gel, or, as you saw, a gas. The doctor looked at Izuku. You, young man, are dangerous. Izuku shrank back. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Dangerous. Not heroic. Not cool. Dangerous. Can he control it? Inko asked, her voice wavering. He has to, the doctor said flatly. Or he'll dissolve his own house. Or his classmates. His body is naturally immune to his own toxins. His skin has a unique lining, much like the stomach lining but external and far more durable. But everything else? The world is made of paper to him. The doctor scribbled a prescription. I'm prescribing heavy-calorie supplements. Creating that much acid burns energy rapidly. If he overuses it, he'll starve his body or his core temperature will drop dangerously low. And I suggest you buy stock in baking soda, Mrs. Midoriya. You're going to need a lot of neutralizers. Izuku hopped off the table, careful not to touch the metal legs. He looked up at his mother, his green eyes wide and watery. He wanted to ask if he could still be a hero. He wanted to ask if All Might would like a quirk like this, but he remembered the All Might figure, reduced to a gray puddle of sludge. He remembered the fear in his mother's eyes when she couldn't hug him. He swallowed the question. It tasted like bile. 10 years later, Aldera Junior High was a typical school, filled with the typical noise of teenagers, shouting, laughing, the scraping of chairs. But in Class 3A, there was a zone of silence. It was a radius of exactly 3 desks surrounding the seat in the back corner. Izuku Midoriya sat there, scribbling furiously in a notebook titled Hero Analysis for the Future No. 13. He wore thick, customized rubber gloves that went up to his elbows, hidden beneath his uniform sleeves. A heavy scarf covered his nose and mouth, though it wasn't cold. On his desk, there was no pencil case. Just a glass jar filled with a white powder, baking soda, and a spray bottle labeled Neutralizing Agent Type C. All right, settle down, the teacher droned, tapping a stack of papers on the podium. You're all third years now. It's time to think seriously about your futures, the class murmured. I would hand out these career aptitude forms, the teacher continued, a smirk playing on his lips, but I assume you all want to go into the hero course. The class erupted. Quirks flashed everywhere, fingers extended, rocks levitated, weak telekinesis rattled windows. Yes, yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, calming them down. But remember, public quirk use is illegal. Save it for the entrance exams. Hey, teach! The voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, leaning back with an arrogant sneer. Don't lump me in with these extras, Bakugo scoffed. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal. I'm going to UA High. Ah, that's right, the teacher nodded. Bakugo, you're aiming for the national top spot, the students whispered in awe. UA was the holy grail. And the teacher added, his eyes sliding to the back corner, it seems Midoriya is also applying to UA. The silence that followed wasn't the usual mockery Izuku expected. In another life, they might have laughed. They might have called him quirkless. Instead, the room went stiff with tension. Bakugo froze. He slowly took his feet off the desk and turned around. His red eyes locked onto Izuku. There was anger there, yes, but also a flicker of something else. Caution, Bakugo growled. Deku. Izuku looked up, his eyes meeting Bakugo's. Kaken, you think you can stand in the same ring as me? Bakugo's palms popped with small explosions, the smell of nitroglycerin wafting through the room. With that freak power of yours? I have as much right as anyone, Izuku said quietly. His voice was muffled by the scarf. You're a walking Superfund sight. A student near the front shouted. You'll melt the teachers before you pass the exam. Yeah. Stay away from us, chem freak. Villain quirk. Izuku flinched. Villain quirk. He'd heard it 1,000 times. Since that day at the doctor's office, his life had become a masterclass in chemistry and restraint. He knew the periodic table better than he knew the names of popular bands. He knew that calcium carbonate neutralized his weaker acids. He knew that his sweat became more acidic when he was stressed. He had never hurt anyone. Not intentionally. But the fear remained. The isolation remained. Bakugo stood up and walked toward Izuku. The class parted like the Red Sea. Nobody wanted to be in the crossfire. Bakugo stopped 3 feet away. He didn't grab Izuku by the collar. He didn't shove him. He knew better. Once, in 4th grade, Bakugo had tried to push Izuku. Izuku had panicked. His skin had secreted a reflexive layer of gel. Bakugo's palm had been burned so badly he couldn't hold a pencil for a month. Since then, the bullying had become psychological. And ranged. You're going to kill someone, Deku, Bakugo said, his voice low. You can't control it. You get scared, you leak. You get angry, you melt things. You're not a hero. You're a biological weapon waiting to go off. Izuku gripped his pen so hard the plastic barrel began to soften under his gloved fingers. I've learned control, Izuku whispered. I'm not the same as I was when we were kids. Prove it, Bakugo sneered. Don't apply to UA unless you want accidental manslaughter on your permanent record. He turned and walked away. Izuku looked down at his desk. A small drop of sweat had escaped his glove and landed on the wood. A tiny wisp of smoke curled up. He quickly grabbed the spray bottle and spritzed the spot. The fizzing stopped. Control, he thought bitterly. I have to have control. The walk home was lonely. Izuku took the long route, the one that went under the overpasses and through the less populated districts. He walked with his head down, muttering chemical formulas to calm himself. Sulfuric acid plus sodium hydroxide yields sodium sulfate and water. Exothermic. Release of heat. Careful with the heat. He clutched his notebook to his chest. He needed to be realistic. Maybe the support course. He could make acids for industrial use. Or the police force? No, they wouldn't let a walking hazard on the beat. He walked into the dark tunnel under the bridge. The acoustics changed, the sounds of the city muffled by the concrete. He heard a wet, squelching sound behind him. Izuku turned. Rising from a manhole cover was a monstrosity of fluid and hate. A massive creature made of dark, green sewage-like sludge, with 2 bulging eyes and a manic grin. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain hissed, his voice gurgling like a clogged drain. Izuku took a step back, his heart hammering against his ribs. Stress levels rising. Cortisol spiking. Sweat glands activating. Don't move, kid, the sludge villain lunged. I just need to hide inside you for a while. It'll hurt, but only for about 45 seconds. Then you'll be dead. The villain surged forward, a tidal wave of muck. Izuku tried to run, but the sludge was faster. It wrapped around his ankles, dragged him down, and engulfed him. Cold. Slimy. Suffocating. The sludge forced its way into Izuku's mouth and nose. Don't struggle. The villain laughed. You can't grab me. I'm fluid. Izuku clawed at the sludge, but his fingers passed right through. He couldn't breathe. His vision began to spot with black. I'm going to die. I'm going to die here, alone, in a sewer. No, I can't die. Panic, raw and primal, exploded in Izuku's brain. And with the panic came the reaction. The biological safeguard his body had developed over 10 years of carrying a quirk too dangerous for a child. Defense mechanism, active. Deep inside his pores, the chemistry shifted. The sweat that usually cooled him turned into a high-molarity corrosive agent. Release. What the? The villain paused. Inside the sludge, Izuku's skin began to glow a faint, sickly green. Suddenly, the villain shrieked. It was a sound of pure agony. Hot. It's hot. Steam erupted from where the sludge touched Izuku's skin. The villain tried to pull away, but the chemical reaction was instantaneous. Izuku's sweat was reacting with the sludge's composition, breaking down the villain's cellular bonds. Izuku wasn't just escaping, he was dissolving his attacker. Get off me! Izuku screamed, though it came out as a gurgle. He squeezed his eyes shut and pushed. A massive burst of acidic gas exploded from his body. The sludge villain lost his cohesion. The dark liquid turned a pale, foamy gray as it denatured. Parts of the villain dripped onto the concrete, sizzling and burning holes in the pavement. My eyes! It burns! The villain howled, flailing. He released Izuku, retreating to the walls of the tunnel, trying to scrape the burning substance off his fluid body. Izuku fell to his hands and knees, coughing violently. He spat out globs of sludge, which sizzled when they hit the ground because his saliva was now potent enough to strip paint. He looked up, gasping for air. The tunnel was filling with a thick, green mist. The villain was writhing in the corner, his mass significantly reduced, bubbling like boiling tar. Izuku scrambled backward, terrified of what he had done. I didn't mean to. The villain was in too much pain to attack. He was trying to hold himself together, literally. Clang! The manhole cover flew into the air. Never fear! For I am here! All Might landed in a crouch, his smile shining in the gloom. He stood up, ready to smash the villain. Texas SMA, All Might stopped. He sniffed the air. He saw the green mist swirling. He saw the boy on the ground, glowing and shivering. And he saw the villain, who was screaming for help. Help me! The villain gurgled at the hero. He's melting me! Save me from the kid! All Might's blue eyes widened. He covered his mouth and nose with his arm. Acid gas? He moved faster than the eye could follow. He didn't attack the villain. He scooped the villain up into 2 empty soda bottles he had in his pockets, carefully avoiding the parts that were still fizzing, and capped them tight. Then he turned to Izuku. The boy was huddled against the wall, clutching his knees. The concrete beneath him was soft, like wet clay. Young man! All Might boomed, though his voice was slightly muffled through his arm. You need to deactivate your quirk. The villain is contained. I can't! Izuku sobbed. I'm scared. It won't stop until I calm down. All Might hesitated. He couldn't touch the boy. The air around him was shimmering with heat and toxicity. This wasn't just a quirk, it was a disaster zone. Okay, listen to my voice. All Might stepped back to a safer distance. Breathe with me. In. Out, Izuku tried. He hyperventilated for a moment, sending more corrosive pulses into the air, causing the overhead lights to flicker and spark as the wiring dissolved. Think of something boring. All Might commanded. Taxes. Groceries. Traffic jams. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. He thought about the molecular structure of table salt. Sodium chloride. Ionic bonds. Lattice structures. Stable. Safe. Slowly, the green glow faded from his skin. The steam stopped rising. The acrid smell lingered, but the active threat diminished. Izuku slumped forward, exhausted. His energy reserves were depleted. He felt cold, so cold. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his vision blurring. All Might stood over him, looking at the devastation in the tunnel. The melted asphalt, the corroded walls, the villain who was lucky to be alive. "You have a formidable power," All Might said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. Izuku sat on the roof of a nearby building. All Might had brought him there to get fresh air, away from the toxic fumes of the tunnel. The number one hero had deflated. Izuku had seen the transformation, the skeleton man in the baggy clothes. He knew the secret. But right now, that revelation paled in comparison to the weight in his chest. "I almost killed him," Izuku said, staring at his hands. The gloves were ruined, melted away. His fingers were stained with soot. "You defended yourself," All Might said, leaning against the railing. He wiped blood from his mouth. "But yes. You were lethal." Izuku looked up, tears stinging his eyes. "Everyone says I'm a villain in the making. My quirk, it doesn't save people, All Might. It destroys. It rots. It hurts." He stood up, his legs shaking. "Even you had to save the villain from me." All Might remained silent. He watched the boy. He saw the fear, the guilt. He saw a child who had been told his entire life that he was a monster. "Can I?" Izuku's voice broke. "Can I be a hero like you? Can I save people with a power that only brings ruin?" The wind blew across the rooftop, ruffling Izuku's messy green hair. All Might thought about One for All. He thought about the need for a successor. He looked at this boy, who possessed a power so terrifying that it could likely melt through the hull of a battleship. If this boy turned evil, he would be unstoppable. If he lost control, he would be a catastrophe. But he hadn't turned evil. He had studied chemistry. He carried neutralizers. He had held back, even in his panic, enough that the villain was still alive. "Heroism," All Might began, his voice raspy but firm, "is not about the tool you are given. It is about the hand that wields it." Izuku held his breath. "I have super strength," All Might said. "With a single punch, I could collapse a building and kill everyone inside. I could decapitate a villain with a flick of my finger. My power is lethal, young Midoriya, deadly, but you control it," Izuku argued. "You save everyone with a smile." "Because I trained," All Might said sharply. "Because I learned restraint. A quirk does not make you a hero. You make you a hero." All Might walked over and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. He felt the boy flinch, afraid he might burn the hero. All Might didn't pull away. "Your power is frightening," All Might admitted. "I will not lie to you. It is a power that walks the fine line between victory and massacre. But today you saved yourself. And you stopped a villain." He looked Izuku in the eye. "It will be harder for you than for anyone else. You will have to work twice as hard to ensure safety. You will have to be a master of your own biology. But, if you can conquer that fear, if you can master that decay," All Might smiled. It wasn't the giant, commercial smile. It was small, genuine, and kind. "Yes. You can be a hero." Izuku's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the rooftop gravel, sobbing. He clutched his chest, wailing into the sky. For the first time in 10 years, someone had told him he wasn't a monster. All Might watched him, a contemplative look on his face. He doesn't need power, All Might thought. He has too much of it. What he needs is a vessel strong enough to contain it, and a mind sharp enough to direct it. "Young Midoriya," All Might said after the boy's sobs subsided. "I have a proposal for you." 5 months later, the UA entrance exam. The gates of UA High towered over the students. Izuku stood in the crowd, adjusting the straps of his new gear. He wasn't wearing the standard track suit. He wore a modified reinforced vest with cooling vents. On his belt, he carried pouches of high-grade sodium bicarbonate and various pressurized canisters. He looked different. His arms were slightly more muscular. All Might's training schedule had been brutal, focusing on core strength and stamina to handle the caloric burn of his quirk. "Out of my way, Deku." Bakugo walked past him, bumping his shoulder. The blonde didn't look back, but his posture was stiff. "Good luck, Kaken," Izuku murmured. He took a deep breath. Analysis complete. Chemistry balanced. Heart rate steady. He walked into the orientation hall. Present Mike shouted the rules. Robots. Points. Destruction. Izuku smiled grimly behind his mask. Destruction. Finally, a test I'm built for. When the gates to Battle Center be opened, Izuku didn't run immediately. He watched the others charge in. He saw a girl with brown hair floating. He saw a guy with engines in his legs zooming past. Then, he moved. He didn't sprint. He skated. A jet of pressurized, low-acidity liquid shot from the soles of his specialized boots, creating a slick path. He slid along it like a surfer, moving faster than most of the runners. A three-pointer robot lunged out of an alley, its metal claws spinning. Target acquired. The robot blared. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't punch. He slid under the robot's legs. As he passed, he reached up and slapped his hand against the robot's knee joint. Quirk release. High-viscosity corrosive gel. He was past the robot in a second. Behind him, there was a sizzling sound. The robot took one step, and its legs simply folded. The metal had turned to gray slush. The massive machine toppled over with a crash, sparking and dying. Izuku stood up, shaking his hand to flick off the excess gel. 6 seconds, he muttered. Too slow. He turned a corner and saw a group of 2-pointers. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs. State change, gas, he exhaled. A thick green fog rolled down the street. It engulfed the robots. Within moments, their optical sensors clouded over and shattered. Their internal wiring corroded. They sparked and shut down, one by one, dropping like flies in a fumigation chamber. From a nearby rooftop, a girl with pink skin and horns watched him. She had just melted the face off a 1-pointer. Whoa, Mina Ashido whispered, watching the green fog swallow the street. That's intense. She saw Izuku walking through the fog, untouched, his eyes glowing green in the mist. He looked like a phantom. A reaper of metal. Izuku checked his mental tally. 45 points. I need more. The ground began to shake. Buildings crumbled. Dust rose. The 0-pointer. It was colossal. A moving mountain of metal. Students were screaming, running away in terror. Run! It's huge! Izuku turned to flee, instinct taking over. It was too big. He couldn't melt that whole thing before it crushed him. Help! The voice was faint. Izuku looked back. The girl with the brown hair, Uraraka. She was trapped under rubble, right in the path of the Titan. Izuku's body moved before his brain could calculate the pH levels. He ignited his acid skate again, rocketing toward the robot. Think, Izuku. You can't melt the whole thing. It's too much mass. You'll burn out your calories and pass out before you get through the armor plating. Go for the joints. Go for the weak points. He reached the rubble. He didn't try to lift it. He placed his hands on the stone trapping Uraraka. Cover your face. He shouted. Uraraka shielded her eyes. Izuku released a burst of Stone-Eater acid. The rock trapping her sizzled and dissolved into a harmless, sandy paste. Get up! He yelled, pulling her free. Run! But the 0-pointer was looming over them. Its massive fist was coming down. Izuku looked up. He couldn't outrun the fist. Offense is the best defense. He took a deep breath. He channeled everything he had. Every calorie from the massive lunch he'd eaten. Every drop of moisture in his body. He grabbed a piece of debris and coated it in a volatile, sticky gel. Hey! Tin Man! He threw the debris. It wasn't a strong throw, but it hit the hydraulic piston on the robot's descending arm. The gel clung. And then, Izuku snapped his fingers, a psychological trigger to activate the secondary reaction. Explosive decomposition. The acid reacted violently with the metal and the air. Boom! A massive cloud of corrosive vapor erupted at the elbow joint. The piston didn't just break, it vanished. The arm lost all tension and swung uselessly to the side, missing the students by inches and crashing into a building. The robot teetered off balance. Izuku fell to his knees, panting. His vision was swimming. His skin felt feverish. He was dangerously close to his limit. The buzzer sounded. Time's up. The dust settled. The silence returned. Izuku looked at his hands. They were trembling. He looked at the girl he had saved. She was staring at him with wide, terrified, grateful eyes. And somewhere in the monitoring room, All Might smiled. That, the hero whispered, is how you use a villain's quirk to do a hero's job. The corrosive kid had arrived. The air in the alleyway smelled of ozone, burnt sewage, and the sharp, stinging scent of vinegar. It was a cocktail of destruction that made the gathered crowd cover their noses and water at the eyes. Blue and red lights flashed against the brick walls, illuminating the slick, melted patches of asphalt where the sludge villain had been scraped up and bottled. The heroes were busy with crowd control, but their eyes kept darting back to the boy sitting on the back of the ambulance bumper. Izuku Midoriya sat with a shock blanket draped over his shoulders. He was shivering violently, not from fear, but from the thermal crash. His quirk, Biohazard, consumed calories at a terrifying rate to produce the complex chemical compounds he secreted. When he panicked, his body dumped its energy reserves into creating the most volatile acids possible, leaving him hollowed out and freezing from the inside. A paramedic was carefully wrapping his hands. The standard gauze wasn't enough. They had to use a specialized, chemically treated polymer wrap usually reserved for industrial accidents. "You're lucky, kid," the paramedic muttered, securing the tape. "Your skin has high resistance, but you pushed it. The pH on your palms was practically negative. If you were anyone else, you wouldn't have hands left." Izuku didn't answer. He was staring at the ground, watching a small, residual drop of green liquid drip from his fingertip and hiss against the pavement. Even exhausted, he was dangerous. "Hey! You!" The voice was harsh. Izuku looked up to see Kamui Woods and Death Arms towering over him. In the original timeline, they had scolded him for his recklessness. Here, their expressions were different. They weren't just annoyed, they were disturbed. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Death Arms barked, crossing his massive arms. "You turned a hostage situation into a hazmat zone. That villain? The police are going to have to hose him into a specialized containment unit because half his mass is destabilized." I was trying to save him," Izuku whispered, his voice hoarse. "Save him?" Kamui Wood shook his head, his wooden limbs creaking. "You nearly dissolved the hostage along with the villain. If that boy hadn't had an explosion quirk to create pressure against your gas, he would have inhaled that mist. Do you know what hydrochloric vapor does to human lungs, kid? It liquefies them." Izuku flinched as if struck. "Liquefies them. You have a powerful quirk," Death Arms said, his voice dropping to a low, warning growl. "But it's a villain's power. It's cruel. It's indiscriminate. Heroes don't melt people. You leave this work to the professionals before you turn someone into a puddle." They walked away, leaving Izuku alone in the cold light of the ambulance. Across the perimeter, Katsuki Bakugo was being praised. The heroes were lauding his bravery, his powerful explosion quirk, his durability. But Izuku saw the way Bakugo looked at him. There was no mockery in Bakugo's eyes tonight. Just a pale, shaken realization. Bakugo was rubbing his arm where the sludge had held him, right next to where Izuku's acid had eaten the villain away. Bakugo knew. He had been inches away from being unmade. The walk home was a blur. Izuku declined the ride from the police, needing to walk, needing to burn off the adrenaline that was making his blood feel like carbonated water. He turned the corner into a quiet residential street, the street lamps flickering overhead. "I am here!" Izuku jumped, nearly activating his quirk again out of sheer reflex. He spun around to see All Might sliding out from an alleyway, striking a pose that looked painful given the steam rising from his body. "Hey, All Might?" Izuku stammered. "I thought you were surrounded by reporters." "I shook them off." All Might laughed, though it quickly turned into a cough. A splatter of blood hit the pavement. In a puff of smoke, the muscle-bound titan vanished, replaced by the gaunt, skeletal figure Izuku had met on the roof earlier. "Young Midoriya," Toshinori Yagi said, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. The playfulness was gone from his face, replaced by a somber gravity. Izuku looked down. "You came to scold me too, didn't you? To tell me I'm dangerous." "No," Toshinori said softly. "I came to thank you." Izuku's head snapped up. "If you hadn't acted," Toshinori said, stepping closer, "I would have been a bystander in that crowd, watching a boy die because I was too busy pitying myself. You spurred me to action. Your legs moved when mine wouldn't. Your volatile intervention created the opening I needed, but I hurt him, Izuku said, his voice trembling. Death Arm said I have a villain's quirk. I panic, and things break down. I study chemistry, I carry neutralizers, but when the fear hits, I just want everything to go away. And my quirk makes things go away. Permanently. Toshinori looked at the boy. He saw the raw potential, yes. But he also saw the terrifying reality of Izuku's existence. This wasn't a boy who needed power. This was a boy who was drowning in it. I told you on the roof that you could be a hero, Toshinori said. I meant it. But we need to have a very serious conversation about the kind of hero you will be. Toshinori sat on the curb, motioning for Izuku to join him. It was an unglamorous setting for a life-changing conversation, a suburban street under a dying streetlight, but it fit. I have a secret, young Midoriya, Toshinori began. My quirk, one for all, is a torch passed down through generations. It stockpiles power. It breaks bodies that aren't ready for it. Izuku listened, wide-eyed, as all might explain the history of one for all. He spoke of the transfer of power, the cultivation of strength, and the search for a successor. I have been looking for a successor, Toshinori admitted. Someone with the heart of a hero. Today, you showed me that heart. Izuku's breath hitched. So, you're going to give me your quirk? Toshinori looked at him, and for a long, agonizing silence, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he shook his head. No. Izuku felt his heart shatter. Oh. I understand. Because of the acid? Because I'm dangerous? Because it would kill you, Toshinori said, his voice sharp and serious. He pointed a bony finger at Izuku's chest. Your body is already a war zone, my boy. You are constantly burning calories to keep your chemical balance in check. Your quirk is a mutation of the highest order, a catastrophic emitter. If I gave you one for all right now, the stockpile of power would interact with your volatile biology. You wouldn't just break your limbs, you would likely undergo a total cellular collapse. You would burn out like a flare. Izuku stared at his hands. The rejection wasn't a judgment of his character. It was a medical diagnosis. However, Toshinori stood up, his shadow stretching long across the road. That does not mean I am not going to train you. You have a quirk that rivals the top pros in terms of raw destructive output. The problem is not that you are weak. The problem is that you are a leaking faucet of lethal poison, and we need to turn you into a pressure washer. Toshinori grinned, the shadows deepening the hollows of his eyes. I am not offering you my quirk, Izuku Midoriya. Not yet. Perhaps never, if your body cannot adapt. But I am offering you my legacy. I will train you. I will teach you how to be a hero who doesn't just destroy, but neutralizes. Izuku stood up. The tears were coming again, burning his ducts, but he wiped them away before they could dissolve his sleeves. You really think I can do it? Without your power? My boy, All Might laughed, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. With a quirk like yours, if you learn to control it, you won't need my power to be number one. You are sitting on a gold mine of potential. We just need to refine the ore. The verdict, the regimen. The next day, the American Dream Plan arrived in Izuku's email. But it was heavily modified, where the standard plan for a quirkless inheritor would involve muscle mass building to hold the recoil of one for all. Izuku's plan was a hybrid of bodybuilding, endurance training, and advanced placement chemistry. Goal: create a vessel capable of sustaining high-output acid production for prolonged periods without thermal crash or caloric deficit. Secondary goal: fine motor control of secretion glands. Dietary restriction: 6,000 calories a day. High protein, high alkaline foods, massive carbohydrate loading. Izuku stared at the plan. It was brutal. 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, cleanup. 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., chemical theory study. 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., school. 3:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., quirk conditioning, solubility testing. 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., endurance running. This is... Izuku muttered, scrolling through the PDF. This is perfect. Month 1. The corrosion of Dagoba Beach. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was less a beach and more a graveyard for the city's unwanted refuse. Tires, refrigerators, broken cars, and mountains of plastic drifted on the sand, obscuring the horizon. On the first morning, Toshinori stood atop a pile of trash, looking like a lighthouse in a sea of garbage. He wore a tracksuit that hung loosely on his frame. "This is your testing ground," All Might shouted. "Generations of trash. People see this and turn a blind eye. Heroes do not turn their eyes away. They clean up the mess." Izuku stood in his gym clothes, wearing heavy-duty industrial gloves and a respirator mask. "So, I move the trash to the truck?" Izuku asked, pointing to the rented dump truck parked on the road. "For the recyclables, yes." All Might nodded. "But look at this." He pointed to a massive, rusted tangle of rebar and concrete, likely runoff from a construction site. It was too heavy to lift, even for a strong man. "A hero must be efficient. You cannot lift this." "So what do you do?" Izuku looked at the metal. He looked at his hands. "I break it down." "Precisely." All Might jumped down. "Your training is twofold. You must identify the material. You must calculate the correct chemical compound to weaken or dissolve it safely without creating toxic runoff that harms the ocean. Then you execute." Izuku approached the rebar. He pulled off his glove. "Iron oxide. Concrete. I need a strong acid for the metal, but something that won't react violently with the seawater if it spills." He focused. He felt the familiar heat in his stomach, the engine of his quirk revving up. He concentrated the sensation into his fingertips. "Hydrochloric acid. Keep the molarity controlled. Don't melt the whole thing, just the connection points." He touched the metal. Hiss. Green foam bubbled up around his fingers. The thick steel rebar groaned, then snapped like a twig. Izuku grabbed the severed piece and hauled it toward the truck. "Excellent!" All Might cheered. "Now do that 500 times before breakfast." The first month was hell. Izuku constantly overshot his limits. He would melt a fridge and then pass out from hypoglycemia. All Might was always there with a protein shake and a thermal blanket. "Eat." All Might would command, shoving a calorie-dense bar into Izuku's mouth. "Your quirk is an engine. You cannot drive a Ferrari on an empty tank." Izuku learned that his quirk wasn't magic. It was exchange. Mass for energy. To create matter acid, he had to give up matter, his own body weight. If he didn't eat, his body would start consuming his own muscle mass to fuel the acid. By the end of the month, Izuku had gained 5 pounds, but he looked thinner. His metabolism was running hot, burning through everything he gave it. Month 3. The chemistry of control. School was a different kind of battlefield. Bakugo had become quiet. He watched Izuku with a hawk-like intensity. The teasing had stopped, replaced by a brooding silence that was almost more unnerving. During science class, they were doing titrations, neutralizing acids with bases. Izuku moved through the experiment with the grace of a master. He didn't need the litmus paper to know the pH. He could smell it. He could feel the ionization in the air. "Midoriya," the teacher called out. "You're done already?" "Yes, sir," Izuku said, placing his beaker down. The liquid inside was perfectly clear water and salt, the result of a flawless neutralization. Bakugo walked by his desk. He glanced at the beaker, then at Izuku. "You're not leaking today," Bakugo muttered, barely audible. Izuku looked up. "I'm taking suppressants." "And?" "I'm training." "Training?" Bakugo scoffed, but he paused. "Don't think learning to hold your bladder makes you a hero, Deku. You're still a hazard." "I know," Izuku said, meeting Bakugo's eyes. "That's why I'm learning to be a hazmat team." Bakugo narrowed his eyes, confused by the confidence in Izuku's voice, then stalked off. That afternoon, at the beach, All Might introduced a new challenge. He set up a series of wooden targets. "Range!" All Might shouted. "You can melt things you touch, but villains won't let you hug them. You need projection." "I can do the mist," Izuku said. "But it drifts. It's dangerous for bystanders." "Exactly. Mist is for area denial. We need precision." All Might picked up a water balloon. "Think of your quirk like this. If you squeeze it, it bursts. But if you channel it through a nozzle, Izuku looked at his fingers. He concentrated. Instead of letting the acid seep out of his pores generally, he tried to force it to the tips of his fingers. He felt the pressure building under his skin. It hurt. It felt like his fingertips were going to pop. Compress it. Increase the viscosity. Make it a gel, not a liquid. He flicked his fingers forward, like he was flicking water at someone. Thwip. A small, dense glob of green gelatin shot from his index finger. It flew 10 feet and splattered against the wooden target. Sizzle. A hole appeared in the wood instantly. Yes. All Might bellowed. Acid shot. Now, control the spread. Make it smaller. Faster. They spent weeks on this. Izuku's fingers became calloused and stained a permanent faint yellow. He learned to vary the shots. The stinger, a high-velocity, needle-thin stream capable of piercing metal. The slime, a heavy, sticky glob meant to gum up machinery or stick a villain's feet to the floor. The net, a wide spray of fast-hardening foam, a non-acidic base he learned to secrete by reversing his chemical polarity, though this was exhausting. Month 6, the veil. Autumn brought rain, and with it, the challenge of moisture. Water diluted his acid. It made his quirk harder to control. Defense. All Might shouted over the roar of the ocean. A hero must protect. If a villain shoots at you, what do you do? Dodge? Izuku panted, hauling a transmission box from a truck. And if you can't dodge? If there is a child behind you? Izuku paused. His skin was his shield, immune to his own power, but he couldn't expand his skin. I need a barrier, Izuku realized. He thought about non-Newtonian fluids. Fluids that hardened upon impact. He thought about surface tension. He stood before the waves. Hit me! Izuku yelled at All Might. What? Throw something at me. I need to test the theory. All Might hesitated, then picked up a rubber tire. Ready? He hurled the tire. It wasn't a full-power All Might throw, but it was fast. Izuku threw his hands up. He didn't shoot a stream. He opened his palms and expelled a massive amount of thick, viscous, translucent slime. He manipulated the surface tension, creating a sheet of goo suspended in the air for a split second. Acid veil. The tire hit the slime. It didn't bounce off. It sank in. The velocity was absorbed by the thick fluid. The rubber hissed as the acid began to eat it, but the momentum was dead. The tire fell to the sand, half dissolved. A shield that eats the attack, All Might mused, stroking his chin. Very dangerous. But effective. If that were a bullet, it would never reach you. I have to be careful, Izuku noted, inspecting the dissolving tire. If I make the shield too acidic, it creates gas when it's hit. I need to balance the pH so it's just sticky, not corrosive, unless I want it to be. Chemistry, All Might sighed, shaking his head. I just punch things. You are turning heroism into a science class. Month 9, the cleanup complete. The beach was unrecognizable. Where there had been mountains of trash, there was now pristine white sand. The ocean view was unobstructed. The smell of rot was gone, replaced by the salty breeze. Izuku stood in the center of the beach, shirtless. He had changed. He wasn't the scrawny, trembling boy from 10 months ago. He was lean, ripped with corded muscle. His skin had a healthy, albeit slightly glossy, sheen to it. The heavy calorie intake and the constant physical labor had built a physique designed for endurance. He held a massive truck tire over his head, not melting it, but lifting it. I did it, Izuku breathed. All Might arrived in his skinny form, carrying 2 bags of convenience store pork buns. He stopped, looking at the beach. Tears welled in his sunken eyes. You didn't just clean it, All Might said softly. You purified it. Izuku dropped the tire and turned. He grinned. It was a confident grin. I recycled most of it. The metals went to the scrapyard. The plastics were broken down into raw polymers. It felt good to use my power to clean instead of destroy. Toshinori walked over and handed him a pork bun. You have mastered the basics, Izuku. You have a body that can withstand the recoil of your own toxicity. You have a mind that understands the responsibility of power. He looked at the horizon. The entrance exam is in 1 week. You aren't going in there with one for all. You are going in there with biohazard. And frankly, I think the robots should be terrified. The entrance exam, the morning of, the Midoriya household was buzzing with anxiety. Inko Midoriya was pacing the hallway. Do you have your lunch? She asked for the 10th time. You need the calories. I packed 6 bentos. Is that enough? Should I make more onigiri? Mom, it's fine, Izuku laughed, lacing up his boots. They were new, custom-ordered with acid-resistant rubber soles. Inko stopped. She looked at her son. He looked so grown up in his middle school uniform, though it was straining slightly at the shoulders now. Izuku, she said, her voice wobbling. I know I haven't always been the most supportive of your dream. I was so scared. I was scared you would hurt yourself, or hurt someone else and be taken away. She reached out, hesitating, then hugged him. She didn't flinch. She knew he had control now. But watching you these last few months, you've worked so hard. You're going to be a hero. A safe hero. Izuku hugged her back, careful with his hands. I will, Mom. I promise. I'll make you proud. He grabbed his bag and walked out the door. At the train station, he saw Bakugo. The blonde was leaning against a pillar, headphones on. He saw Izuku and took them off. So, Bakugo said, his voice flat. You didn't quit. No, Izuku said, standing straight. I didn't. Bakugo scanned him up and down. He noticed the muscle. He noticed the lack of nervous ticking. Don't get in my way, Deku, Bakugo grunted, pushing past him to get on the train. Or I'll blast you. I'd like to see you try, Izuku murmured under his breath, a small smile playing on his lips. The written exam. The written portion was a breeze. Izuku breezed through the general subjects. When it came to the science portion, he practically rewrote the test. The questions on chemical reactions were child's play compared to the complex biological alchemy he performed in his own body every day. Question 14. Describe the reaction between hydrochloric acid and aluminum. Izuku's answer. 2L6HCl2Alcl33H2. Exothermic. Rapid hydrogen gas release. Note: in a combat scenario, this gas is flammable. Use with caution. He finished with time to spare. The practical exam, Battle Center B. Standing before the massive gates of the battle center, Izuku felt the familiar cocktail of nerves. But this time, he had a mechanism to handle it. Heart rate 110. Adrenaline rising. Cortisol spiking. Stomach acid increasing. He reached into his utility belt, a simple pouch belt he was allowed to bring, and popped a chewable antacid tablet. He crunched it loudly. Neutralize the gut. Focus the mind. He looked around. The other examinees were stretching, checking their quirks. He saw the laser navel guy. He saw the engine leg guy. Hey, Izuku turned. It was the girl with the pink skin and horns, Mina Ashido. She was bouncing on the balls of her feet. You got acid too, right? She asked, grinning. I saw you at the register. We're like quirk cousins. Izuku blinked. Oh. Yes. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Mina Ashido. She pointed to her feet. I secrete acid from my feet to slide. And I can throw it a little. What about you? I can secrete it from anywhere, Izuku admitted. And I can change the state of matter. Mina's eyes widened. Like gas? That's hardcore. Don't melt me, okay? I'll try not to, Izuku said seriously. I was joking. She punched his arm lightly. Relax. It's just robots. Let's melt some metal. Start. President Mick's voice boomed over the speakers. There are no countdowns in real battles. Go. 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 While the others hesitated, confused by the abrupt start, Izuku moved. He didn't run. He flowed. He dropped into a low crouch, activated the glands in his feet, and pushed off. A hiss of steam, and he was skating across the pavement, leaving a glistening trail behind him. He bypassed the confused crowd in seconds. First target, three-pointer. The robot wheeled around the corner. Izuku didn't slow down. He adjusted his trajectory, sliding directly toward it. Acid shot cutter. He slashed his hand through the air. A thin, pressurized arc of high-molarity liquid struck the robot's neck. It sliced through the cabling like a hot knife through butter. The robot's head fell off before Izuku even passed it. 3 points. He kept moving. He was a whirlwind of corrosion. A 2-pointer lunged. Izuku threw a slime bomb, a dense ball of sticky gel, into its face. The gel blocked the sensors and began eating into the metal casing. The robot thrashed blindly, crashing into a wall. 5 points. He reached the central plaza. It was chaos. Explosions, lasers, debris. Izuku spotted a cluster of robots surrounding a panicked student, a boy with a tail. Crowd control required. Izuku took a deep breath. Acid veil, mist variant. He exhaled a controlled burst of heavy, green fog. It rolled over the robots. The student with the tail covered his mouth, terrified, but the mist hung low, targeting the machinery. The robots began to spark. Their joints seized up as the acid ate the lubricants, and rusted the gears instantly. They collapsed, twitching. Clear out! Izuku yelled, his voice cutting through the fog. The air is toxic near the ground. The tailed boy scrambled up a lamppost. Thanks. 20 points. Izuku was in the zone. He wasn't thinking about being a hero. He was thinking about efficiency. Every movement was calculated to conserve calories. Every shot was aimed at a weak point. Then, the ground shook. The 0-pointer. It rose above the buildings, a titan of destruction. The sheer displacement of air as it moved knocked students off their feet. Izuku skidded to a halt. He looked up. Too big, his analytical mind screamed. Can't melt it. Not enough volume. He turned to retreat. That was the logical move. It was an obstacle to be avoided, but then he heard the cry. Uraraka Ochako was trapped. Izuku's body moved before his analysis could catch up. The logic of saving calories vanished, replaced by the logic of saving life. He skated toward the robot. The dust was thick. The robot's foot was descending. I need height. I need power. He saw the vertical walls of the buildings flanking the street. Wall ride? He sprayed a high-friction, sticky compound onto his boots. He ran up the side of the building, defying gravity for a few precious seconds. He launched himself off the wall, soaring through the air toward the robot's head. He was 50 feet in the air. Eat this. Izuku didn't use a stream. He didn't use a mist. He brought both hands together. Super move, biohazard meltdown. He unleashed a massive torrent of his strongest acid directly into the robot's face, the main sensor array and intake vents. The acid hit the machinery. The reaction was catastrophic. The metal didn't just melt, it boiled. The acid flooded the internal chassis, eating through the motherboard, the hydraulics, the power couplings. The 0-pointer groaned, a sound like tearing metal. Explosions rippled through its body as its internal systems failed. Izuku fell through the air. He had expelled too much. He was empty. Gravity, he thought vaguely. I'm going to hit the ground. Slap. Uraraka, freed from the rubble, had slapped him in midair as she floated by on a piece of debris, nullifying his gravity. She released him just a few feet off the ground. Izuku landed in a heap. He threw up a little, just clear bile. He was starving. His body temperature was plummeting, but the robot was down. Its head was a smoking crater of slag. The buzzer sounded. Izuku lay on the pavement, staring at the sky. His vision was tunneling. I did it, he thought. I didn't kill anyone. Then darkness. The aftermath, the letter. He woke up in Recovery Girl's office. She was scolding him while feeding him glucose gummies. You completely drained your glycogen stores, she chided. And you have mild hypothermia. What kind of reckless quirk usage is this? The heroic kind? Izuku mumbled, his mouth full of gummies. The week of waiting was torture. Izuku paced his room. He did pull-ups. He reorganized his chemical supplies. Inko was a wreck. She baked 3 cakes in 2 days. Then, the letter came. Izuku took it to his room. He sat at his desk, staring at the wax seal. This is it. The verdict. He tore it open. A holographic disc fell out. It whirred to life. All Might appeared, projected against the wall. He was wearing a yellow suit that looked ridiculous. I am here. As a projection, Izuku smiled, despite his nerves. Young Midoriya. All Might boomed. You did well on the written exam. But the practical? Oh, the practical. The video cut to footage of the exam. It showed Izuku melting the robots. It showed the efficiency, the speed. You earned 45 villain points. A respectable score. But, the video paused. It switched to a clip of Izuku running up the wall. Of him diving toward the zero-pointer while others ran away. A hero's job is to save. And you risked your life, and your caloric reserves, to save a fellow examinee. The video showed Uraraka in the judge's room, pleading for them to give the melting boy some of her points. You don't need her points, young Midoriya. All Might shouted. Because the judges look for more than just destruction. We look for the spirit of rescue. Rescue points, 60. Total score, 105, Izuku gasped. All Might leaned into the camera. The projection seemed to look right into Izuku's soul. You have a power that frightens people, Izuku. But on that battlefield, you used it to protect. You turned a hazard into a hope. All Might extended his hand. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the dark, tears streaming down his face. These tears were clear. They were pure water. He wiped his eyes, stood up, and looked at the All Might poster on his wall, the one right next to the periodic table of elements. I'm going, he whispered. He looked at the shelf where he kept his gear. The gloves. The mask. The neutralizers. And I'm going to be the guy who cleans up the mess. The gates of UA High stood like the precipice of a new world. To the average passerby, they were a security measure. To Izuku Midoriya, they were a containment breach waiting to happen. He stood on the sidewalk, the morning sun casting long shadows across the pavement. He adjusted the straps of his modified backpack. It wasn't filled with textbooks today, but with calorie-dense nutrient bars, spare regulator nozzles for his gloves, and 3 liters of an alkaline solution he brewed in his kitchen sink the night before. Out of the way, Deku. The voice was low, lacking its usual explosive volume but retaining all the heat. Katsuki Bakugo brushed past him, his hands deep in his pockets. He didn't stop to shove Izuku. He didn't even look at him. There was a singular focus in Bakugo's red eyes that Izuku recognized. It was the look of a predator entering a new hunting ground. Good luck, Kaken, Izuku murmured. Bakugo paused for a microsecond, his shoulders stiffening, before he scoffed, and kept walking. Don't melt the furniture, nerd. It was the closest thing to a good luck Izuku was going to get. He took a deep breath, tasting the city air. Nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide. He exhaled. Carbon dioxide, water vapor, and a trace amount of sulfur. His body was humming. The American Dream Plan had worked. He felt heavy, not with fat, but with potential energy. He was a battery charged to 100%, and today, he had to discharge it without blowing up the building. The written exam. The lecture hall was vast, amphitheater-style seating that made the examinees feel small. Izuku sat near the back, his pencils neatly aligned. When the exams were distributed, the silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the scratching of graphite on paper. Izuku flipped the booklet open. Section 1, General Studies. Easy. Section 2, Hero Law and Ethics. Section 3, Quirk Science and Physics. Izuku's eyes lit up. He dove into the science section with a hunger that unnerved the student sitting next to him. Question 24. A villain with a liquefaction quirk has destabilized the structural integrity of a suspension bridge. The villain is subdued, but the bridge is collapsing. Describe the optimal chemical countermeasure to stabilize the structure temporarily. Izuku smiled beneath his mask. He wrote furiously. Answer. Immediate application of a rapid hardening polymer foam or a cyanoacrylate-based adhesive spray to bind the microfractures. However, if the villain used an acid-based liquefier, a base agent, sodium bicarbonate or magnesium hydroxide, must be applied first to neutralize the active corrosion, otherwise, the adhesive will fail to bond. Heat generation from the neutralization reaction must be accounted for to prevent thermal warping of the remaining steel. He checked his work. It was precise. It was practical. It was exactly what he did every day to ensure his bedroom floor didn't turn into a basement entrance. He breezed through the math. He destroyed the history section. By the time the proctor called pencils down, Izuku was vibrating with restless energy. His brain was awake, but his body, specifically his quirk factor, was itching for release. The orientation. Everybody say hey. Present Mick's voice hit the auditorium like a sonic boom. The pro hero was a pillar of leather and volume, standing on a stage bathed in spotlights. Welcome to the show, listeners. Today, we're gonna separate the pros from the joes. The heroes from the zeros. Izuku sat on the edge of his seat, muttering along with every word, analyzing the hero's vocal projection quirk. Beside him, Bakugo was practically vibrating with irritation. Check the screen, Mike shouted, pointing to a massive digital display behind him. We've got 3 targets for you today. The 1-pointer, the 2-pointer, and the heavy hitter, the 3-pointer. Robots. Izuku's mind raced. Metal alloys. Probably titanium steel composites for durability, but likely aluminum plating to keep costs down for mass production. Melting point of aluminum, 660 degrees Celsius. Melting point of titanium, 1668 degrees. My acid doesn't rely on heat, but on chemical oxidation. I need a high molarity oxidative agent. Aqua Regia variant? No, too slow. I need something that attacks the lattice structure instantly, he began to mutter. The sound was a low, rapid-fire buzzing. Excuse me, a hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. A tall boy with glasses and a severe haircut stood up, pointing rigidly at the stage. May I ask a question? The boy boomed. The handout clearly lists 4 types of villains, yet you have only explained 3. If this is an error on the part of UA, it is shameful for Japan's top academy. He then spun around, pointing a stiff finger directly at Izuku. And you? With the curly hair and the hazardous waist gear, Izuku froze. And me? You've been muttering chemical formulas and pH balances for the last 5 minutes. It is incredibly distracting. If you are here to conduct a science experiment, please leave. This is a hero exam, the auditorium chuckled. Izuku felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was the simmering warmth of his quirk reacting to stress. He clamped a hand over his mouth, feeling a small puff of acidic vapor escape his lips into his palm. Sorry, Izuku squeaked, his voice muffled. Just preparing the mixture. Okay, settle down, exam number 7111. Present Mike waved his hands. And you, listener, thanks for the segue. The 4th villain is a 0-pointer. Think of it like a stage hazard. It's huge, it's mean, and it's worth absolutely nothing. If you see it, run. Izuku looked at the silhouette of the massive robot on the screen. It looked like a skyscraper on tank treads. Run, he repeated mentally. Unless, Battle Center B. The bus ride to the practical exam site was tense. Students checked their gear, stretched their limbs, and eyed their competition. Izuku stood near the back, adjusting the regulator valves on his gloves. He wore a dark green, fire-resistant bodysuit with thick, rubberized padding on his forearms and shins. Around his waist was a utility belt filled with canisters of powder, alkaline agents to neutralize his own acid if he went overboard. He looked less like a superhero and more like a specialized waste disposal unit. He stepped off the bus and looked up. Battle Center B was a city. A literal, mock city with paved streets, multi-story buildings, and streetlights. It was pristine. It's huge, Izuku breathed. Right, Izuku turned. Standing next to him was a girl with pink skin, pink hair, and small yellow horns. Her eyes were black with yellow irises, giving her an alien, yet friendly, appearance. She wore a purple and orange bodysuit with a chaotic, acid splatter pattern. I'm Mina! She chirped, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Mina Ashido. Are you ready to melt some stuff? I saw your gear. We're totally quirk cousins. Izuku blinked. Quirk cousins? Yeah. I shoot acid too. She held up her hands, and a small amount of slime dripped from her palms. Well, mostly I slide on it. But I can throw it. Yours looks serious, though. Is that a gas mask? It's a respirator, Izuku corrected, tapping the device hanging around his neck. Just in case I create a toxic cloud. My acid can change states of matter. If I get stressed, it turns to gas. You don't want to breathe it. Mina's eyes widened. Whoa. Gas? That's intense. I just make things goop. She looked at him with a mix of awe and slight intimidation. So you're like, the heavy artillery version of me? I guess. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Well, Izuku, Mina grinned, flashing sharp teeth. Let's see who melts more bots. Before Izuku could reply, the massive steel gates began to rumble open. There was no countdown. No buzzer. Just the grinding of gears. The other students hesitated, waiting for a signal. But Izuku remembered All Might's training. Villains don't count down. Disasters don't wait for the starter pistol. He moved. He didn't run. He dropped into a crouch and activated the glands on the soles of his boots. Quirk release. Viscosity level 4. Lubricant agent. A clear, slick fluid coated the bottom of his boots. He pushed off the pavement, skating forward with incredible speed. It was like watching an ice skater on asphalt. What are you waiting for? President Mick's voice screamed from the observation tower. There are no countdowns in real battles. Follow that kid. The crowd surged forward, but Izuku was already gone. The practical, the corrosion. Izuku turned the first corner, his boots hissing as they skimmed over the concrete. He was alone for a split second. Then, a mechanical whirring. A one-pointer, a simple tracked robot with a single optical sensor, rolled out of an alleyway. Target acquired. Izuku didn't slow down. He didn't even stop skating. He adjusted his trajectory, angling his body like a slalom skier. As he passed the robot, he extended his right hand. Quirk release, contact melting. He slapped the robot's side panel. He didn't punch it, he just touched it. Hiss. It sounded like a steak hitting a scorching grill. The metal plate turned a sickly gray, then bubbled, then dissolved into a thick sludge. The acid ate through the casing, through the wires, and into the battery core. The robot sparked, twitched, and collapsed into a pile of smoking scrap. 1 point, Izuku counted, not looking back. He kept moving. He had to keep moving. If he stopped, he gave the other students time to catch up. Two two-pointers appeared, blocking the street. They raised rubber bullet cannons. Izuku skidded to a halt, the friction of his boots creating a squealing noise. He took a breath. Range check, 10 meters. Too far for touch. Too close for gas. He raised both hands, fingers splayed. Quirk release. Acid shot shotgun spread. He fired a volley of viscous, green globs from his fingertips. They flew through the air, splattering against the robot's cannons and sensors. The reaction was instant. The acid ate the barrels of the guns, fusing them shut. The sensors were blinded by the opaque slime, which then proceeded to eat through the glass. The robots fired. The bullets exploded inside the fused barrels, blowing the robot's arms off. 11 points. He was in the zone. He wasn't thinking about All Might. He wasn't thinking about being the #1 hero. He was thinking about pH. He was thinking about molecular bonds. Out of the way, a laser beam shot past Izuku's ear. A blond boy with a belt laser blasted a 3-pointer that Izuku had been eyeing. My kill! The boy shouted. Izuku ignored him. He turned left, scaling a fire escape. He used the sticky, adhesive variant of his acid on his gloves to grip the metal bars, vaulting up to the roof. From the high ground, he saw the battlefield. It was chaos. Explosions, ice engines. But he also saw the clusters. Groups of robots surrounding overwhelmed students. He spotted a boy with elbows that looked like tape dispensers, cornered by 3 3-pointers. Elevation advantage. Wind direction, north to south. Safe to use gas. Izuku took a deep breath. He leaped from the roof. Mid-air, he exhaled. Quirk release. Corrosive mist the green fog. A cloud of heavy, neon green vapor billowed from his mouth. It descended on the alleyway like a plague. The boy with the tape elbows looked up in terror and scrambled back, covering his mouth. The mist enveloped the robots. It didn't melt them instantly. It was subtler. It entered their intake fans. It seeped into their joints. Creak. Snap. The acid mist attacked the lubrication and the fine wiring. The robots slowed down. Their movements became jerky. Sparks flew from their joints as the protective coatings were stripped away. Izuku landed in the center of the mist. To him, the air was sweet. To the robots, it was death. He walked past them, touching each one on the main chassis. They collapsed, their internal structures compromised. You saved me, the tape boy coughed, waving the green air away. Get to higher ground, Izuku said, his voice distorted by his respirator. The gas is heavier than air. It'll settle in the street. He skated away, leaving a trail of dissolving metal in his wake. The observer, Mina Ashido, was having a great time. She was sliding around, melting robot feet, dancing through the battlefield. She was confident. She knew her acid was strong. Then she turned a corner and saw him. Izuku was fighting a group of 5 robots. He wasn't dancing. He was dismantling. He fired a stream of high-pressure liquid that cut a robot's arm off. He threw a glob of gel that ate through a chassis in seconds. But it was the mist that stopped her. She watched as he exhaled a cloud that made the metal rot. It wasn't just melting, it was decomposing. The steel turned to rust, then to dust, in seconds. Holy crap, Mina whispered. He's not just an acid man. He's a biohazard. She felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the realization that in the hierarchy of corrosive quirks, she might have just met the king, the 0 point. The buzzer was minutes away. Izuku had 58 points. It was enough. He knew it was enough. He leaned against a building, panting. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a tube of high-calorie glucose gel. He downed it in one squeeze. His body was cold. The caloric burn was catching up to him. His fingers were trembling, and the acid dripping from them was becoming thin, watery. I need to conserve, he thought. Just wait it out. Rumble. The pavement vibrated. Pebbles danced on the street. What was that? A student nearby asked. Then, the sun was blocked out. The 0 pointer rose from the center of the city. It was a monstrosity of engineering. A towering green behemoth that eclipsed the buildings around it. Its single red eye scanned the city, and its massive treads crushed the mock pavement into gravel. Total destruction, Izuku whispered. Panic erupted. Run! It's the 0 pointer! It's huge! The wave of students turned and fled. It was a stampede. Izuku turned with them. His logical brain was screaming the same thing. Run. It's worth 0 points. It's an environmental hazard. Retreat. He activated his boots, ready to skate away. Oh wow! The cry was faint, buried under the sound of crushing concrete and screaming students. Izuku stopped. He looked back. Through the dust cloud, he saw her. The girl with the round face. Uraraka. She was trapped under a massive slab of concrete that had fallen from a damaged building. The 0 pointer was looming over her, its massive tread descending. She couldn't move. She was struggling, but the rock was too heavy. The other students were running away. Even the one with the glasses and engines in his legs was retreating. Logic, run. You can't fight that. Instinct, save her. Izuku looked at the robot. It was at least 20 stories tall. Its armor plating was thick, likely reinforced titanium. I can't melt that whole thing, Izuku thought. I'll burn out my caloric reserves before I get through the ankle. But looking at Uraraka's terrified face, the calculation changed. I don't need to melt the whole thing. Just the brain. Izuku turned around. He didn't skate away. He skated toward the Titan. Hey! Mina shouted from a safe distance. Greenie! What are you doing? You can't melt that. Izuku didn't answer. He hit the base of the robot. The treads were churning, throwing up dust and rocks. He looked up at the vertical surface of the robot's leg. Adhesion protocol. Maximum stickiness. He secreted a thick, glue-like slime onto his palms and the soles of his boots. He jumped onto the moving tread, sticking to it. As the tread rotated up, he rode it, then leaped onto the leg armor. He began to climb. He moved like a spider, slapping his hands against the metal, the acid instantly bonding him to the surface, then liquefying it enough to pull free. Stick, melt, pull. Stick, melt, pull. He rocketed up the leg. The robot sensed him. Small defensive turrets on its torso swiveled. Machine guns. Izuku grit his teeth. Not today! He waved his hand, creating a temporary acid veil, a sheet of dense, non-Newtonian slime suspended in the air. The rubber bullets hit the slime and stopped dead, dissolving. He reached the hip joint. He vaulted over it, landing on the torso. The wind was whipping his face. He was high up. The students below looked like ants. He saw the head. The sensor array. The neck connection. That's the weak point. The cabling. But he was running on fumes. He felt the cold seeping into his bones. His vision was blurring. One shot, he told himself. I have enough juice for one massive purge. He sprinted up the chest of the robot. The 0-pointer raised a massive hand to swat him like a fly. Too slow! Izuku screamed. He launched himself off the chest, soaring through the air toward the neck. He ripped off his gloves. He ripped off his respirator. He needed direct contact. He needed maximum airflow. He landed on the thick bundle of cables connecting the head to the body. He wrapped his arms and legs around the metal column. Biohazard. Izuku closed his eyes. He visualized the acid in his stomach, in his blood, in his sweat glands. He pulled every spare calorie, every ounce of energy. Melt down, he exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was a deluge. A massive geyser of super-concentrated acid erupted from his entire body. It was a dark, bubbling violet, the color of extreme toxicity. The sound was deafening. Kshuhum. The thick steel cables didn't stand a chance. They didn't melt, they evaporated. The acid ate through the titanium shielding, through the copper wiring, through the hydraulic lines. Steam and green gas enveloped the robot's head. The 0-pointer froze. Its eye flickered. Then, with a groan that sounded like a dying whale, the metal gave way. The head of the robot sheared off completely. It slid backward, disconnected from the body, and crashed into the street below with an earth-shaking thud. The massive body of the robot stood still for a second, then slumped, powered down. Izuku let go. He was falling. He had nothing left. No energy to secrete a landing cushion. No strength to grab a ledge. He was just a boy falling from the sky, freezing cold, his skin pale and shivering. I did it, he thought, watching the clouds spin. I saved her. He closed his eyes, waiting for the impact. Slap. He didn't hit the ground. He felt a light touch on his cheek. The sensation of falling stopped, replaced by a weightless drift. He opened his eyes to see Uraraka, floating on a piece of debris she had levitated, reaching out to him. Her fingers were pressed together in a release sign. Release! She gasped. Gravity returned. Izuku dropped the remaining 3 feet, landing in a heap on the ground. Uraraka collapsed next to him, retching from the nausea of overusing her quirk. Izuku lay there, staring at the sky. His body was smoking, steam rising from his skin as the residual acid evaporated. The area around him was a scorched circle of melted asphalt. Silence descended on the battle center. Slowly, students began to emerge from hiding. They looked at the headless giant. They looked at the smoking boy on the ground. Did he? Someone whispered. Did he just decapitate the 0-pointer? Mina Ashido walked up to the edge of the melted circle. She looked at Izuku, who was shivering violently, his lips turning blue from the thermal crash. That, Mina said, her voice filled with a terrified respect, was the coolest thing I have ever seen. Time's up. The siren wailed across the city. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He tried to move his arm, but it was heavy. Are you okay? Uraraka crawled over to him. You're really cold. Calorie burnout, Izuku chattered, his teeth clacking. Need sugar. Just then, a small, elderly woman pushed her way through the crowd. Make way! Make way! Recovery girl hobbled forward. She took one look at the destruction, then at the boy. Oh dear, she sighed, shaking her head. You certainly have a flair for the dramatic, don't you? And you've given yourself hypothermia. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of glucose candies. Eat these. Now. Izuku chewed them weakly. The sugar hit his bloodstream, and the shivering subsided slightly. You possess a frightening power, young man, Recovery girl said, kissing his forehead to accelerate his healing of the minor burns he'd given himself. But you saved this girl. That counts for something. The result. 1 week later, the Midoriya household was quiet. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at the letter. He had replayed the exam in his head 1,000 times. He had 58 combat points. It was a good score. But was it enough? He had destroyed property. He had terrified the other students. He tore the envelope open. A metal disc fell onto the desk. BZZT. A hologram projected onto the wall. I am here. As a projection, All Might stood in his yellow suit, striking a pose. Young Midoriya. You have waited long. And now, the results are in. The hologram shifted. It showed video footage of Izuku in the exam. It showed him melting the robots. It showed the green mist. You fought with the ferocity of a villain. All Might laughed. I received several complaints about the smell of sulfur. But, the video cut to the 0-pointer. It showed Izuku climbing the leg. It showed him tearing the head off. In the face of overwhelming danger, you did not run. You acted to save a comrade. The video showed the judges' panel. They were watching the footage of Izuku protecting Uraraka. Heroism is not just about fighting villains. It is about saving lives. And for that, we have rescue points. A scoreboard appeared. Izuku Midoriya, villain points, 58. Rescue points, 60. Total, 118 points. First place. All Might shouted, throwing his arms up. You are the top scorer of the entrance exam. You melted the competition, young Midoriya. Izuku stared at the number. 118. Come, Izuku Midoriya, All Might said, extending a hand toward the camera. This is your Hero Academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the silence of his room. He looked at his hands, the hands that could rot steel and dissolve stone. The hands that everyone said were made for villainy. He clenched them into fists. I made it, he whispered. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. The corrosive kid was gone. Hazmat was just getting started. The morning sun hit the glass facade of UA High, reflecting a blinding white light that seemed to promise a future as bright as it was terrifying. For Izuku Midoriya, standing at the massive front gates, the light wasn't just a metaphor. It was heat. And heat meant energy. He adjusted the collar of his uniform. It was stiff, brand new, and slightly modified. Underneath the standard gray blazer, he wore a thin, compression-style undershirt made of a specialized polymer weave designed to absorb minor acidic leaks. His hands were encased in fingerless gloves that stopped at the second knuckle, the material thick and rubberized. He checked his pocket. Nutrient bars, check. Alkaline spray, check. pH strips, check. Eat, he whispered to himself. He pulled a high-density calorie bar from his bag and tore the wrapper with his teeth. He chewed mechanically. His quirk, biohazard, was a biological furnace. Just standing here, nervous and vibrating with anxiety, he was burning through his breakfast. If he let his blood sugar drop too low, his body temperature would plummet, and his control would slip. A shivering Izuku was a leaking Izuku. Move it, Deku. The voice was low, lacking the usual screaming intensity, but heavy with a different kind of pressure. Katsuki Bakugo walked past him, hands deep in his pockets. He didn't shove Izuku. In fact, he gave Izuku a wide berth, about 3 feet of clearance. Izuku swallowed the dense paste of the energy bar. Morning, Kaken? Bakugo didn't acknowledge him. He just kept walking, his shoulders hunched. Since the sludge villain incident, and especially since the results of the entrance exam where Izuku had outscored him in rescue points, Bakugo had been quiet. It was the silence of a volcano before an eruption, or perhaps the silence of a man who suddenly realized the dynamite he was holding had a shorter fuse than he thought. Izuku took a deep breath. Nitrogen. Oxygen. Possibility. He walked through the gates. The big door. Class 1A. The letters were painted in bold red on a door that was roughly 20 feet tall. It's huge, Izuku thought, staring up at the handle. Is it for accessibility? For students with mutation quirks? Or just to intimidate us? He reached out, careful to use the rubberized palm of his glove to push the door open. He didn't want to leave a handprint etched into the varnish on the first day. The classroom was already buzzing. Don't put your feet on the desk. Ha! Who are you to tell me what to do, Four Eyes? I am Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. It is disrespectful to the UA upperclassmen who use these desks. Izuku froze. Ida. The scary guy from the entrance exam orientation. And Bakugo. The two most intense people he had met so far were in his class. I'm going to die, Izuku muttered. He tried to sneak in, but the door clicked shut behind him. Ida spun around. His engines whirred softly. Ah! You! The tall, bespectacled boy marched toward Izuku with the stride of a military robot. Izuku braced himself for a lecture on muttering, or being a hazard. Instead, Ida extended a hand. I am Tenya Ida, he announced. I must apologize. I misjudged you during the entrance exam. You perceived the true nature of the test, the rescue component, while I was blinded by the superficial objective. I hate to admit it, but you are the better student. Izuku blinked, staring at the hand. He hesitated. I'm Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. And, I can't shake your hand. Without the glove. Ida looked at Izuku's glove. He nodded solemnly. Safety first. A prudent decision for a hero. Hey! It's you! A bubbly voice cut through the tension. Izuku turned to see the brown-haired girl he had saved, Uraraka, beaming at him. You're the guy who melted the giant robot. She cheered, pumping her fist. That was amazing! 1 second it was there, and the next, whoosh, it was headless. I'm Ochako Uraraka. It was nothing, Izuku stammered, his face heating up. Heat. Bad. Cool down. I just panic chemistry. Panic chemistry? Uraraka tilted her head. Is that a thing? Yo! Acid bro. Before he could answer, a pink arm draped over his shoulder. Izuku flinched, instinctively pulling his arms in to avoid accidental contact, but the girl didn't seem to mind. Mina Ashido grinned at him, her yellow horns glinting under the classroom lights. I knew you'd make it. We're in the same class. This is destiny. Ashido-san, Izuku managed to squeak. Call me Mina! We're the Acid Alliance now, she declared, winking at the rest of the class. You guys better watch out. Between my slides and his, well, everything else, we're gonna dissolve the competition. Dissolve? A small boy with grape-like balls on his head, Mineta, looked terrified. Is that a metaphor? With him? Mina pointed a thumb at Izuku. Nope. Literal dissolution. I saw him turn a robot into soup. The class went silent. Several pairs of eyes turned to Izuku. They weren't hostile, but they were wary. Kirishima, the red-haired boy, looked impressed. Yayorozu, the girl with the ponytail, looked analytically curious. Ajiri, the frog girl, just said ribbit. Izuku shrank into his scarf. Great. Now I'm the designated bioweapon. If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. The class froze. Lying in the doorway, encased in a bright yellow sleeping bag like a gargantuan caterpillar, was a man. He looked exhausted. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot, and he sucked on a pouch of jelly drink with the enthusiasm of a man on life support. He unzipped the bag and stood up. He wore all black, with a capture scarf wrapped around his neck. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, checking a stopwatch. Time is a limited resource. You kids aren't rational enough. He walked to the podium, his gaze sweeping over the students. When his eyes landed on Izuku, they lingered for a fraction of a second too long. It was a look of cold calculation. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. Homeroom teacher? The class thought in unison. He looks like a homeless person. Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of blue gym uniforms. Put these on and meet me on the grounds, he said flatly. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The locker room. The boys' locker room was filled with the sound of zippers and rustling fabric. Man, I was hoping for a ceremony, Kirishima said, pulling his shirt off. But Yui really doesn't mess around, huh? Izuku stood in the corner, facing his locker. He unbuttoned his shirt slowly. Hey, Midoriya, right? Kirishima walked over, grinning. I'm Eijiro Kirishima. My quirk is hardening. Ashido was saying you have an acid quirk? That's manly. Oh, thanks, Izuku said. He pulled his shirt off. The chatter in the locker room died down instantly. Izuku's back was a map of his own power. Pale, jagged scars ran across his shoulder blades. There were patches of discolored skin on his arms where chemical burns had healed over and over again. But beneath the scars, the muscle definition was terrifying. It wasn't the aesthetic muscle of a bodybuilder. It was the dense, ropey muscle of someone who had dragged trucks across a beach for 10 months. But the most striking thing was the ports. Along his spine and on the back of his triceps, there were small, circular scarring patterns where his glands were most active, like vents on a machine. Whoa, Kirishima whispered. Dude. Those scars. Izuku quickly pulled the blue gym track jacket on, zipping it up to his chin. He pulled his gloves back on, securing the Velcro straps tightly. Occupational hazard, Izuku mumbled, grabbing his shoes. My quirk, it's corrosive to everything. Including me, sometimes. Bakugo, who was changing on the other side of the room, slammed his locker shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Stop staring, extras, Bakugo growled. Or he'll melt your eyes out, he stormed out. Is he always like that? Kaminari, the blonde with the lightning bolt streak, asked. Yeah, Izuku sighed, picking up his specialized belt containing his neutralizers. That's him being nice. The rational deception. The sun was high now. The pea grounds were vast, a testament to UA's budget. Aizawa stood with his hands in his pockets, looking bored. A quirk apprehension test? Uraraka asked. But what about the entrance ceremony? The guidance counselor meeting? If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa deadpanned. UA's selling point is freedom. That applies to the teachers as well. He looked at Bakugo. Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try doing it with your quirk, Aizawa tossed him a ball. Anything goes, as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo walked to the circle. He stretched his arms. He glared at Izuku, then at the ball. Die! Boom! The explosion was massive. The ball rocketed into the sky, leaving a trail of smoke. Aizawa held up his device. 705.2 meters. Whoa! 700 meters? Kaminari cheered. This looks like fun. Mina laughed, clapping her hands. We can use our quirks as much as we want? Fun? Aizawa's eyes narrowed. The air temperature seemed to drop. You have 3 years to become a hero. You think it's going to be all games and playtime? He smiled, and it was a terrifying, jagged expression. Right. Let's make this interesting. The student with the lowest total score across all 8 events will be judged as having no potential and will be expelled immediately. Expelled? The class screamed. That's not fair. Uraraka protested. It's the first day. Natural disasters aren't fair, Aizawa retorted. Villain attacks aren't fair. Calculated chaos is what we do. Now show me what you've got. His eyes slid to Izuku. Especially you, Midoriya. I saw your entrance exam footage. Breaking a robot is one thing. Controlling your power in a precision environment is another. Don't disappoint me. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida was up first against Ajui. Ida used his engine quirk to blast across the finish line in 3.04 seconds. Ajui hopped in at 5.58. Next up, Midoriya and Bakugo. Izuku walked to the line. He could feel Bakugo's heat radiating beside him. Don't expect me to go easy just because you have a hazmat suit now, Bakugo hissed. I don't expect anything, Kaken, Izuku said. He crouched low. He didn't take a runner's stance. He looked like a skater preparing for a launch. Start. Bakugo exploded forward, propelling himself with blasts behind him. Izuku stomped his right foot. Quirk release. High-pressure jet. A concentrated stream of pressurized liquid shot from the soles of his shoes. It wasn't just lubricant, it was propulsion. He didn't run, he slid. He looked like a surfer riding an invisible wave. He leaned forward, aerodynamics working in his favor, skating over the track. He crossed the line. Bakugo, 4.13 seconds. Midoriya, 4.50 seconds. Izuku skidded to a stop, using a sticky gel from his heels to brake. Smoke rose from the track where his acid had eaten a thin layer of the rubber. TCH, Bakugo spat. Slippery bastard. Aizawa looked at the track damage. He marked something on his clipboard. Midoriya. You're damaging the facilities. It's surface level, sir, Izuku panted. I used a low molarity mix. Efficient, Aizawa muttered. But messy. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku held the digital dynamometer. He squeezed. Don't use the quirk. Just use muscle. He squeezed harder. 56 kilograms. Above average, thanks to the beach cleaning. Hey, look at Shoji! Someone yelled. 540 kilograms. Izuku's focus wavered. He felt a spike of competitiveness. I can do better. Just a little boost. A mild muscular stimulant acid. He concentrated. His palm heated up. Squelch. The plastic casing of the dynamometer softened. His fingers sank into the device like it was made of warm butter. The digital screen flickered, distorted, and then melted into a black goo. Ah, Izuku whispered. Aizawa appeared behind him like a ghost. That device cost 8,000 yen. I can pay for it, Izuku offered weakly, holding up the dripping remains. Next event, Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples. Test 3, standing long jump. Bakugo blasted himself across the sandbox. Aoyama used his laser to fly, and crash. Mina Ashido coated her feet in slick acid and slid across the sand, laughing. Beat that, acid bro. Izuku stepped up. He couldn't slide on sand, it would just turn into sludge. Propulsion, he thought. Gas expansion. He turned his back to the pit. He jumped backward, clapping his hands together violently while releasing a volatile gas mixture. Thum. The expanding gas acted like an air cannon. It launched him backward over the pit. He landed gracefully, until his feet touched the sand, dissolved it into glass, and he slipped, falling on his butt. Cleared the distance, the machine beeped. Elegant, Aoyama critiqued. But messy landing. Test 5, ball throw. This was it. The main event. Uraraka had just gotten infinity, which demoralized everyone. Midoriya, Aizawa called. You're up. Izuku walked to the circle. He held the ball. It was standard regulation. He looked at the field. 700 meters was the beat to beat. Without super strength, he couldn't throw it that far physically. Chemistry, he thought. Physics. He pulled a small vial from his belt, pure sodium bicarbonate powder. He coated the ball in it. What's he doing? Kaminari asked. Baking a cake? He's making a bomb, Bakugo said quietly. Izuku held the ball. He needed to secrete his acid, coat the ball in a gelatinous layer to seal the powder, and then, at the moment of the throw, inject the catalyst to create a hyperpressurized reaction inside the coating. Rocket propulsion. He wound up. His arm glowed green. Activate. He tried to release the acid. Nothing happened. The heat in his veins vanished. The bubbling sensation in his stomach stopped. He felt empty. Normal. He threw the ball. It flew 46 meters. Huh! Izuku stared at his hand. My quirk? I erased it. The voice was cold and sharp. Izuku turned. Aizawa stood there, his hair floating in defiance of gravity, his eyes glowing a piercing red. The capture scarf was floating around him like a nest of snakes. That entrance exam, Aizawa said, walking closer. It wasn't rational. You have a powerful quirk, Midoriya, but it is fundamentally destructive. Every time you use it, something melts. The track, the grip tester, the sand. Aizawa stopped inches from Izuku's face. You look at this class and see rivals. I look at you and see a liability. If you were to save a hostage, would you melt the hostage too? If you fight a villain, do you dissolve the city block? You have power, but you lack the ability to contain it. He closed his eyes. His hair fell. You are not a hero. You are a hazmat incident waiting to happen. I should expel you now and save the sanitation department the trouble. Izuku trembled. It wasn't the first time he'd heard this. Villain quirk. Monster. Dangerous. But then he remembered the beach. He remembered All Might. It is not the quirk that makes the hero. Izuku's voice shook, but his eyes were hard. I'm not a disaster. Aizawa opened his eyes. They were dark again. Then prove it. You have one more throw. If you melt the ball, you're out. If you don't break 500 meters, you're out. He stepped back. Izuku looked at the ball. He retrieved it. Don't melt the ball. Use the reaction to push it, not destroy it. He needed a buffer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick, rubberized patch he used for leak repairs on his suit. He slapped it onto the back of the ball, the reaction chamber. He concentrated. He didn't need a massive explosion. He needed a directed charge. He coated his palm in a thick, stable gel. He placed the ball in his hand, the rubber patch against his skin. He wound up. Focus. Don't let it leak. Don't let it eat the leather. Nitric acid hydrazine compound. Rocket fuel. He injected the mixture into the space between his hand and the rubber patch. Smash! He yelled, old habits die hard. He threw his arm forward. At the apex of the throw, the chemicals reacted. Crack! It sounded like a gunshot. A burst of green gas exploded from his palm. The force didn't melt the ball. It hit the rubber patch, transferring all the kinetic energy into the sphere. The ball screamed into the sky. It broke the sound barrier with a high-pitched whistle. Izuku gripped his wrist. The recoil had nearly dislocated his shoulder. His palm was smoking, red and angry, but not dissolved. The class watched in silence as the ball disappeared into the clouds. Aizawa looked at his device. 709.6 meters. He showed the screen to Izuku. Izuku held up his hand. It was shaking, covered in soot, but the skin was intact. I didn't melt it, Sensei, Izuku said, staring defiantly at the teacher. And I'm still standing. Aizawa stared at him. For a moment, the terrifying expression returned. Then, the corners of his mouth twitched up into a manic grin. Good. The aftermath. Dude! Kirishima ran up to him. That was insane. You turned your hand into a cannon. How did you do that without blowing your fingers off? Sero asked, looking at Izuku's red palm. Calculation, Izuku muttered, applying a cooling spray from his belt. I had to calculate the burn rate of the gas expansion versus the tensile strength of the rubber patch. DKU. The crowd parted. Bakugo charged. His hands were popping with explosions. What the hell was that? Bakugo screamed, his eyes wide with a mix of fury and confusion. You don't have a propulsion quirk. You rot things. How did you blast that ball further than me? He lunged. Tell me, you bastard! Izuku flinched, preparing to defend himself. Thwip. The capture scarf wrapped around Bakugo, binding his arms and mouth. GHGG. Bakugo struggled. Stop using your quirks, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing red again. I have dry eye. Don't make me use my quirk more than necessary. He released Bakugo, who stumbled back, glaring daggers at Izuku. We're done here, Aizawa said, turning to the scoreboard. 1. Momo Yayorozu, she created a cannon. Pure cheating, but efficient. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Izuku Midoriya. 20. Minoru Mineta. Izuku let out a breath. 4th. He was 4th. By the way, Aizawa said, scrolling through the data. The expulsion thing was a lie. Huh? The class screamed. It was a rational ruse to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. I knew it, Yayorozu said, clutching her chest. It was obviously a pedagogical technique. No, it wasn't, Aizawa whispered to himself as he walked away. I would have expelled them if they had zero potential. That Midoriya kid, he's a headache. But a useful one. The walk home. The sun was setting, casting the campus in orange light. Izuku walked toward the gate, his body aching. He was starving again. He needed a massive dinner. Midoriya! Ida caught up to him. That throw was magnificent. You utilized the chemical byproducts of your quirk to generate kinetic force. Genius! Thanks, Ida-kun. Izuku smiled tiredly. Wait up. Uraraka ran over. Hey! You guys going to the station? We are, Ida nodded. I'm Ochako Uraraka, she said again. You're Ida, and you're Deku, right? Izuku froze. Well, my name is Izuku. Deku is just what Kaken calls me to make fun of me. Really? Uraraka blinked. But it sounds like Dikairo. Like you can do it. I kinda like it. Izuku blushed. Midoriya, Ida said sternly. You should correct her if it is offensive. Izuku looked at Uraraka's smile. He thought about Bakugo using the name as an insult for years. Defenseless Izuku. Useless Deku. But today, he wasn't defenseless. He was a cannon. He was a hazard. But he was here. No, Izuku shook his head, smiling back. Deku is fine. It sounds like a hero name. Deku it is! Uraraka cheered. From the shadows of the main building, All Might watched the three students walk away. You were hard on him, Aizawa, All Might said. Aizawa stepped out from behind a pillar. He wasn't looking at the students. He was looking at the melted patch of asphalt on the track. He has a quirk that destroys, Aizawa said. If he doesn't learn strict control, he won't just fail. He'll kill someone. I don't care about his feelings. I care about his victim count. Aizawa sipped his juice pouch, but he hesitated. He analyzed. And he turned a lethal weapon into a propulsion system. He might not be a disaster after all. All Might grinned. He's a bright one. He's a problem, Aizawa corrected. But he's our problem now.